22-year-old Jasmine Carter stood barefoot on her father's front porch in 8 inches of Christmas Eve snow. Her entire body shook violently as the cold carved through her thin cotton socks like knives. She could hear them inside. 35 guests, laughing, clinking champagne glasses, singing carols around the 9-foot tree she'd spent 3 days decorating. Jasmine pressed her numb hand against the frosted window and watched her stepsister Morgan blow her a kiss, then slowly pull the curtain closed. That's when Jasmine whispered the same prayer she'd been whispering for 13 years. "Mama, if you can hear me, I need you." What Jasmine didn't know was that her prayer had already been answered. A pair of headlights was turning onto Oakwood Drive at that exact moment. Behind the wheel sat a woman Jasmine's father claimed had been dead since before Jasmine was born. But that woman wasn't dead. She was furious. And she had receipts. Legal receipts. The kind that would strip Jasmine's father of everything he thought he owned. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Because what happened in the next 47 minutes would change Jasmine's life forever. But to understand how she ended up locked outside in the snow, we need to go back 13 years. 13 years earlier, the sky hung gray and heavy the morning they buried Jasmine's mother, Nicole. 9-year-old Jasmine stood between her father, David, and a tall black woman with silver-streaked hair who smelled like vanilla and old books. The woman held Jasmine's hand so gently it felt like being wrapped in the softest blanket in the world. "Your mama loved you more than breathing, baby girl," the woman whispered. "And so do I." Jasmine looked up. "Are you Grandma Ruth?" "I am, sweet pea, and I'm never letting you go." But David stepped between them so fast the movement made Jasmine stumble backward. "You need to leave, Ruth," he said through clenched teeth. Now, Ruth stood taller, her voice steel-wrapped in silk. "She's my granddaughter, David. My daughter's child." David's jaw locked. "Not anymore." Ruth looked past him, her eyes finding Jasmine's. Her lips moved in silence. "I will find you." Then she walked away, her shoulders shaking as she reached her car. Jasmine tried to run after her, but David's hand clamped down on her shoulder. "Wave goodbye, Jasmine," he said coldly. "You'll never see her again." And for 13 years, Jasmine believed him. What Jasmine didn't know was that every single birthday after that funeral, a package arrived at their house. But Jasmine never saw a single one. Why? That answer would come. But not yet. 18 months after Nicole's funeral, David moved Jasmine to a new town 70 miles away. New school, new address, new phone number. "Fresh start," he said. But the only thing that felt fresh was the cold basement where Jasmine would soon be sleeping. Because 6 weeks later, David brought home a woman named Patricia and her daughter, Morgan. Patricia was white, blonde, and smiled with too many teeth. Morgan was 16, beautiful, and looked at Jasmine like she was a stain on expensive carpet. "Girls, you're sisters now," Patricia announced at dinner, squeezing both their shoulders. Morgan smiled. Jasmine tried to. Within 2 weeks, Morgan had moved into Jasmine's bedroom, the one upstairs with the bay window Nicole had installed by hand. The room filled with afternoon sunlight and the scent of the lavender sachets Nicole made. Jasmine was moved to the basement. "Morgan needs natural light for her complexion," Patricia explained, not even looking at Jasmine when she said it. Morgan didn't have a skin condition. She just liked taking selfies in good lighting. Jasmine learned the new rules quickly. Wake at 5:45 a.m. Make breakfast for 4. Pack Morgan's lunch. Wash dishes. Fold laundry. Stay quiet. Stay invisible. If she asked why Morgan never helped, Patricia's eyes would fill with theatrical tears. "I try so hard to love you like my own, Jasmine," Patricia would sob. "Why do you resent me?" And David would glare. "Apologize. Now." So Jasmine apologized. Again, and again, and again, because challenging Patricia only brought more punishment. What Jasmine didn't know was that Patricia was building something in that house. Not a family, a kingdom. And in Patricia's kingdom, there was only room for one daughter. But there was something else Jasmine didn't know. Something hidden in that basement. Behind the water heater. In a box marked with her mother's handwriting. A box that would shatter every lie David ever told. Jasmine turned 20 in April. No card. No cake. Not even acknowledgement. Morgan turned 23 the same month and received a used Honda Civic with a bow on it. "She's finding herself," Patricia cooed proudly. Meanwhile, Jasmine worked 2 jobs to pay for community college textbooks. One night in late November, Jasmine went to the basement looking for extra blankets. The house was freezing. David refused to heat the basement because it wasted money. Behind the old water heater, shoved into a corner thick with dust, Jasmine spotted a cardboard box. The handwriting on the side made her freeze. Nicole's personal items. Her mother's handwriting. Jasmine's hands shook as she opened it. Inside, a silk scarf still carrying the ghost of perfume. A journal. And a photograph. The photo showed Nicole laughing beside an older black woman in a navy dress and pearls. On the back, in blue ink, Nicole and Mom, Ruth's 58th birthday. The date stamp read August 2009, 2 years before Jasmine was born. Jasmine's breath caught in her throat. David told her grandma Ruth died before Jasmine was even born. He said Ruth never wanted children, that she abandoned Nicole. But this photograph, this dated photograph, proved he lied. Jasmine almost Googled Ruth's name right there, but she stopped herself. David checked her phone every Sunday night. He monitored her laptop. If she searched, he'd know. So she closed the box carefully, memorized where it sat, and waited. 3 months later, when she came home for spring break, the box was gone. Vanished. Jasmine found Patricia arranging flowers in the dining room. "Where's the box behind the water heater?" Jasmine asked quietly. Patricia didn't look up. "Old junk. Donated it." Jasmine's heart dropped into her stomach. "It was my mom's." Patricia sighed like Jasmine was asking her to move a mountain. "Sweetie, it was collecting dust." That night, Jasmine couldn't sleep. Something gnawed at her. She opened her phone and scrolled through local resale listings. And there it was. Her mother's pearl necklace. The one Nicole wore in every photo. Listed for $65. The seller's name? Patricia's email handle. The same one she used for church newsletters. Jasmine took screenshots. Her hands shook so badly, she almost dropped the phone. The next morning, she found David in the garage. "She's selling Mom's things," Jasmine said quietly, holding out her phone. David barely glanced at the screen. "Patricia is my wife. This is her house, too. Drop it." Jasmine's voice cracked. They were Mom's. David's voice turned to ice. "Drop it, Jasmine. Now." The garage door slammed shut, and Jasmine stood alone, staring at the oil stain on the concrete, realizing something she'd been too afraid to admit for years. Her father didn't love her. He tolerated her. And worse, he'd been erasing her mother piece by piece. Jasmine didn't know it yet, but someone had been watching that house for 3 days. Someone who'd hired private investigators. Someone who'd never stopped looking. And that someone was about to make an entrance no one in that house would ever forget. December arrived cold and bitter. David called a family meeting. Patricia sat beside him with a pen and notepad like she was running a board meeting. "We're hosting Christmas Eve," David announced. 35 guests. "Jasmine, you handle everything. Food, decorations, the tree, all of it." Jasmine glanced at Morgan, who was scrolling through her phone. "What's Morgan doing?" Patricia smiled brightly. "Morgan's managing the guest list, sweetie." For 3 straight days, Jasmine cooked from dawn until midnight. She glazed a 15-pound ham, rolled out pie crusts, chopped vegetables until her hands were cramped, ironed the linen tablecloth that still smelled faintly of lavender. On December 23rd, she stood in front of the massive tree and counted the gifts beneath it. 37 wrapped boxes. Not a single one had her name. When she asked Patricia if there was a gift for her, Patricia laughed softly. "Don't be dramatic, honey. Family helps family." Jasmine walked back to the kitchen without another word. That afternoon, their neighbor, Mrs. Chun, a tiny Chinese woman with sharp eyes, knocked on the side door holding gingerbread cookies. Her gaze immediately landed on Jasmine. Flour on her cheek, apron stained, hands trembling. "All this is you?" Mrs. Chun asked gently. Jasmine nodded. Mrs. Chun touched her elbow and pulled her outside. "Honey," she whispered urgently, "a black town car sat in front of this house yesterday. For 2 hours. And you." She paused. "You look just like your mother." Jasmine's heart hammered. "What?" Before Mrs. Chun could answer, David appeared in the doorway, smiling too sharply. "Thanks for the cookies, Mrs. Chun," he said warmly. But his eyes screamed a warning. Mrs. Chun straightened, her face tight with worry. "Merry Christmas, sweetheart," she whispered to Jasmine before leaving quickly. Christmas Eve exploded into chaos. Guests filled every room. Laughter, music, the smell of ham and cinnamon. Jasmine stayed in the kitchen, plating appetizers while listening to David introduce Morgan to everyone. "She's been such a blessing," he said proudly. When someone asked where Jasmine was, Patricia replied smoothly, "Oh, she loves staying busy." She insisted. Jasmine finally stepped into the dining room, wearing her one clean navy sweater. She sat at the far end of the table where no place card waited for her. She watched silently as gift after gift was opened. Morgan squealing, Patricia beaming, David laughing with guests like he'd built this life with his bare hands. When the pile of presents shrank to almost nothing, Jasmine's voice cut through the noise. "Dad, is there one for me?" The room went silent. Completely silent. Like someone had pressed mute on the entire universe. Patricia's eyes instantly filled with tears. "Jasmine," she whispered dramatically, "this isn't the time." Jasmine's voice stayed calm. "Steady. I'm just asking." David stood so fast his chair scraped against the hardwood floor. He grabbed Jasmine's upper arm and yanked her toward the door. "We talked about this," he hissed in her ear. "You want to embarrass me? Do it outside." He shoved her onto the front porch. The freezing air hit Jasmine like a wall of ice. She stumbled, catching herself on the railing. David slammed the door. She heard the lock click. Jasmine stood there in her thin sweater and cotton socks, watching her breath form clouds in the December air. Inside, the music resumed. Laughter bubbled up again like nothing had happened. Her feet burned against the snow. Then they went numb. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. Then 20. Through the frosted window, she could see Morgan spot her. Their eyes met. Morgan smiled slowly, lifted her champagne glass in a mock toast, and pulled the curtain shut. Jasmine curled her arms around herself, her whole body shaking violently. "Mama," she whispered into the wind. "I don't know what to do anymore." Inside, David was already rewriting history. "Jasmine's been struggling," he told the guests, his voice heavy with false concern. "We've tried everything." Patricia dabbed her eyes with a napkin. "I just want her to be happy." Morgan added softly from the couch. "She screamed at Mom last week for no reason." Every word was a lie, but not a single person questioned them. Jasmine pressed her forehead against the cold window, tears freezing on her cheeks. She thought she might faint. Or worse. That's when she saw Mrs. Chun inside, standing near the window, watching her with horror on her face. Mrs. Chun turned sharply and said something to David. He waved her off dismissively, annoyed. Mrs. Chun stared at him for a long, hard moment. Then she grabbed her coat and walked toward the back door instead of the front. Moments later, Jasmine heard footsteps crunching through the snow behind her. Mrs. Chun appeared with a thick wool blanket and wrapped it around Jasmine's shaking shoulders. "Sweetheart," she whispered urgently. "I called someone." Jasmine's teeth chattered so hard she could barely speak. "Who?" Mrs. Chun knelt in the snow beside her, eyes fierce and protective. "Someone who should have been here 13 years ago." That's when Jasmine heard it. A deep, powerful engine rumbling down Oakwood Drive. The front door flew open. David stepped onto the porch, his face red with anger. "Mrs. Chun, this is a family matter." She didn't move. "A child standing barefoot in the snow is everyone's matter, David." He scoffed. "She's learning a lesson." Mrs. Chun stood slowly, brushing snow off her knees. When she spoke, her voice could have cut steel. "Nicole would be ashamed of you." David's face went white, then purple. But before he could respond, the headlights appeared. A long black limousine glided to the curb like a ship docking at port. Its headlights washed over the snow, turning everything silver and blue. The engine quieted. A driver stepped out wearing a pressed gray suit. He walked to the back door and opened it carefully. First, a black man in a charcoal coat emerged, carrying a leather briefcase. His expression was all business. Then a hand appeared on the doorframe. Elegant, steady, wearing a single gold ring. And then she stepped out. A tall black woman wrapped in a white wool coat, silver hair pinned back in a neat bun, her posture radiating strength and fury in equal measure. She saw Jasmine, and she stopped breathing. In 5 determined strides, she crossed the yard, removed her coat, and draped it around Jasmine's trembling shoulders. Her voice cracked with 13 years of grief and love. "Little star." Jasmine looked up into the woman's face and saw her mother's eyes staring back at her. She whispered, "Grandma Ruth?" Ruth cupped Jasmine's frozen face in her warm hands, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I know you, baby girl. I've been looking for you every single day for 13 years." Jasmine collapsed into her grandmother's arms as the snow swirled around them. Ruth held her like she was the most precious thing in the entire world. Then Ruth looked toward the glowing house, and her expression turned to ice. "Mr. Harrison," she said firmly. The man with the briefcase stepped forward. Ruth walked straight to the front door, her heels clicking against the porch steps with military precision. She knocked 3 times. Steady. Final. Like a judge's gavel. David opened the door, champagne still in hand, a confused smile on his face. When he saw Ruth, the glass tilted. Champagne spilled onto his wrist. "Ruth," he choked. What are you doing here?" She didn't smile. Didn't blink. "You locked my granddaughter outside in the snow," Ruth said, her voice sharp enough to silence the entire room behind him. "On Christmas Eve. In the house that I own." Gasps exploded from the living room. Patricia stood from the couch, her face tight with confusion and rising panic. "Who is this woman?" she demanded. Ruth ignored her and stepped inside, her presence commanding every eye in the room. She pointed to the documents Mr. Harrison placed on the dining table. 47 Oakwood Drive was purchased by me in 2003 as a wedding gift for my daughter Nicole. The deed is in my name. It has always been in my name. David's face drained of all color. He stammered, "I've been paying, this is my home." Ruth shook her head slowly, her voice calm but lethal. "You've been living here rent-free for 20 years, David. I allowed it for Nicole's sake. Then for Jasmine's sake. But you used this house as a cage. And you used my grief as a weapon." Mr. Harrison placed a thick stack of envelopes on the table, bound with string. Ruth picked them up and held them toward the guests. 13 years of letters, she said. Birthday cards. Christmas gifts. All returned to sender. Every single one. The room fell into suffocating silence. Jasmine stepped inside, wrapped in Ruth's coat, her feet leaving wet prints on the hardwood floor. She looked at David, her voice barely above a whisper. "You sent them back." David's voice cracked. "She's manipulating you, Jasmine. Just like she manipulated your mother." A voice rose from the back of the room. "It was Mrs. Chun." "That's a lie, David. I was there. I was Nicole's friend. Nicole loved her mother. You were the one who cut Ruth off." David's shoulders sagged under the weight of the truth. Patricia backed away slowly, her purse already on her arm, realizing the foundation of her entire life was collapsing beneath her feet. Morgan stared at her father, confused and shaking, finally understanding that everything he'd ever told her was built on lies. And in the center of the room, David had nothing left to say. Ruth waited for complete silence before she spoke again. Her voice was steady, final, unshakable. "Effective January 15th, I am reclaiming this property. You have 3 weeks to vacate." Linda inhaled sharply, turning to David with fury and betrayal blazing in her eyes. "You told me this was your house." David shook his head weakly, but no words came. His mouth opened and closed like a fish drowning in air. Ruth turned slowly to Patricia, her gaze pinning her in place. "And you," she said quietly, "selling my daughter's pearl necklace for $65. Shameful." Patricia staggered backward, all color draining from her face. Morgan gasped, looking at her mother with dawning horror. Mr. Harrison closed the briefcase with a soft, final click. The guests exchanged uncomfortable glances, some already reaching for their coats, desperate to escape the wreckage unfolding before them. David tried one last angle, his voice suddenly soft, almost pleading. "Jasmine, sweetheart, don't let her come between us. I lost my temper tonight. You know I love you." Jasmine looked at him, really looked at him, for the first time in years. She remembered the cold, the locked door, the years of being invisible, the quiet cruelty woven into every single day, the lies about Ruth, the stolen letters, the erased memories of her mother. "You didn't lose your temper," she said quietly. "You made a choice, just like you chose to hide my letters, just like you chose to tell me my grandmother abandoned me, just like you chose Patricia and Morgan over me every single day for 13 years. His face tightened, his jaw clenched, but she continued. "And I'm done pretending it was anything else." Ruth stepped beside her, steady as a pillar. The guests watched in stunned silence. Not one person stepped forward to defend David this time. Not one. Jasmine slipped her hand into Ruth's, feeling warmth spread through her numb fingers like light flooding a dark room. "I'm done waiting outside your door," she said quietly, and she meant every word. Ruth squeezed her hand, tears streaming freely down her face. "Come home, sweetheart." Mrs. Chin opened the front door wider, her eyes full of pride and relief and fierce protective love. Jasmine walked out of that house without looking back. The limousine's warmth wrapped around her like the softest blanket in the world. Ruth sat beside her, gently covering her legs with another blanket, tucking it around her with the kind of tenderness Jasmine hadn't felt in over a decade. Jasmine felt her chest crack open, not from pain, but from release. Like chains falling away after years of being bound. Like finally being able to breathe. As the limousine pulled away, Jasmine watched the house shrink into the distance. The Christmas lights flickered in the windows, but none of that warmth had ever truly been hers. Ruth held Jasmine's freezing hands and whispered, "I looked for you every day. I hired investigators. I searched records. I never stopped." Jasmine's voice broke. "He said you didn't want me. He said you were dead." Ruth shook her head, eyes shining with unshed tears. "I wanted you so much I spent my entire savings trying to find you. The first 2 investigators found nothing because your father hid everything under different names, different addresses. The 3rd investigator found this address 3 days ago, and I came immediately. Not for Christmas. For you." Jasmine cried freely, the sound raw and shaking. 13 years of swallowed pain finally finding air. Ruth didn't hush her or rush her. She simply held her, steady and sure, like someone determined never to let go again. When Jasmine finally quieted, she leaned her head against the window, watching the snow blur past. For the first time in 13 years, she wasn't cold. When they arrived at Ruth's home, a warm craftsman house on a peaceful hill surrounded by oak trees, Ruth showed her the upstairs bedroom. It was filled with soft afternoon sunlight, decorated in shades of lavender and cream. "You deserve light," Ruth said softly, her voice thick with emotion. "You deserve warmth. You deserve to be seen." Jasmine slept that night without fear for the first time in years. The next weeks unfolded gently, like petals opening in the sun. Jasmine finished her nursing program while living with Ruth. Every morning, Ruth insisted on driving her to the bus station. "I missed too many years," Ruth said quietly. "Let me have these moments." When graduation came in May, Ruth sat proudly in the second row beside Mrs. Chun, both of them clapping with both hands as Jasmine crossed the stage in her cap and gown. Later, at home, Ruth placed a large wooden box on the kitchen table. Inside were 156 letters. Every birthday, every Christmas, every milestone, every moment of love Jasmine was meant to receive. Jasmine read them all, tears dripping onto the envelopes, her heart breaking and healing at the same time. 1 year later, Jasmine stood in Ruth's living room beside a small Christmas tree decorated with soft white lights and delicate glass ornaments. Snow fell outside, gentle and quiet, but she watched it from the warm side of the window. Around her neck rested a pearl necklace, a replica of her mother's, made from an old photograph Ruth had saved for over 2 decades. Jasmine placed her hand over the pearls and smiled softly. Last Christmas, she had stood freezing on a porch, believing she had no place in the world, believing she was unloved and unwanted. This Christmas, she stood in a home filled with love. Real love. The kind that doesn't demand silence or submission. The kind that searches for 13 years and never gives up. Ruth walked into the room carrying 2 mugs of hot chocolate topped with marshmallows. She handed one to Jasmine and stood beside her at the window. "Merry Christmas, little star," Ruth whispered. Jasmine whispered back, "Merry Christmas, Grandma." And as the snow continued to fall outside, soft and steady and endless, Jasmine finally understood what home was supposed to feel like. It wasn't a house with locked doors and cold basements. It wasn't forced smiles and swallowed apologies. Home was this, standing beside someone who saw you, who chose you, who would cross any distance to find you. Home was love that never gave up. And Jasmine Carter, after 13 long years in the cold, was finally